In January 25, Donald Trump strode back into the Oval Office with the triumphant swagger of a man convinced that history had finally bent to his will. Within days he issued the proclamation of continental sovereignty, borders sealed, refugee pathways annulled, green cards suspended, and a brand new lattice of steel and composite erected atop the old southern wall. Television anchors called it the Iron Curtain of the West, but dissidents inside simply whispered the cage. Airlines rerouted, visas vanished, and a nation of immigrants became a fortress whose gates rusted shut from disuse. Aliyah Darwish felt the rattle of caterpillar drills almost every dawn. The Syrian-born structural engineer lived 4 miles from the border in a rented adobe plastered with faded murals of monarch butterflies. She had fled Aleppo at 14, survived every immigration checkpoint Jeff Sessions once promised would be airtight, earned a PhD at Stanford, and now drafted reinforcement schematics for municipal bridges no one in Washington bothered to fund. On the morning after the proclamation, she watched a convoy of Tesla-branded security drones rise like steel swans and blanket the sky, casting shadows that moved faster than birds could fly. That silence, the hush right after jet rotors throttled down, told her the country she loved could no longer hear itself breathe. That afternoon, Aliyah biked to an abandoned storm drain junction, heart hammering like a piston. Waiting in the darkness were 4 strangers turned co-conspirators: Mateo Rivera, a robotics prodigy who once built autonomous orchard harvesters before tariffs strangled his startup; Jiawen Li, a cybersecurity savant whose parents were deported on Inauguration Week; Omar Khoury, a Palestinian civil miner who could read rock strata the way some read palms; and Lucia Alvarez, former dreamer, current EMT, smuggler of insulin for children sealed behind new checkpoints. 5 chairs encircled a cracked concrete pedestal, the world's loneliest roundtable. They called themselves Project Horizon because everything beyond the wall had become a rumor of light. Mateo unrolled blueprints torn from obsolete city archives. Every storm sewer, every forgotten aquifer channel, every abandoned mineshaft, he said, stabbing at faded ink. If we dig shallow, Border Patrol ground-penetrating radar will nail us. But the bedrock here is limestone, porous, fracture-rich. We tunnel beneath radar, then resurface 20 miles north, past the secondary fence. People go out, medicine and letters come back in. We trade fear for motion. Jiawen outlined the digital front, spoof the drone swarm's telemetry, inject phantom heat signatures to the patrol algorithms built on repurposed Tesla autopilot code. Aliyah calculated load paths, Omar plotted blasting powder angles, Lucia mapped triage stations for exhausted travelers. They spoke with the urgency of air raid survivors, each sentence a fuse burning toward dawn. By sunrise, they had a timetable: 8 months to punch the first tunnel from Grid Square Alpha Zero to Safe House Lantern north of Las Cruces. No signatures, no slogans, just the quiet arithmetic of rebellion. Days blurred into weeks. Caterpillar excavators thundered overhead while Project Horizon burrowed below. They printed custom carbide drill bits on an industrial 3D printer salvaged from a bankrupt aerospace plant. Omar mixed controlled yield thermite charges using scrap iron oxide and aluminum powder siphoned from junkyard cans of paint primer. The smell of ozone and scorched sand clung to their clothes like a permanent tattoo. When fatigue set in, Lucia played contraband recordings of old border lullabies, voices of mothers who once rocked children to sleep now echoed in stone corridors fit for exodus. A tyranny scaled with technology. Homeland Security deployed Sentinel Eyes, solar-powered towers crowned with neural cameras fed by Musk's Starlink mesh. Any deviation in subsurface density triggered automated alerts, and the desert swarmed with armored patrols. To conceal the spoil, Mateo designed a conveyor that ground excavated rock into silt, piped it through irrigation lines, and dispersed it at night like phantom dust storms. Jiawen bricked a rogue server into a church basement and flooded Sentinel Eyes with decoy tremors from distant monsoon thunder. Every sunrise felt stolen. Even so, risk whistled through every air shaft. One night, a seismic sensor near Sector 12 registered an anomaly: 9 seconds of rhythmic vibration at a depth of 42 feet. Patrol Commander Major Silas Reed traced the echo to an unmarked drainage node. He marked it for daytime investigation, unaware that Mateo lay less than 30 feet beyond, ears pressed against limestone, counting the ticking march of boot heels above. Inside the tunnel, silence became scripture. They learned to breathe in unison, to halt drills when coyotes howled, a frequency Homeland drones dismissed as wildlife. Aliyah memorized the tremor signature of passing Caterpillar track loaders so she could sync percussion blasts between their roars. Omar, ever the geologist, tasted grains of dust to judge when strata shifted from pliant marl to brittle chert. They advanced inches a night, but inches compounded. Word spread in whispers through detention centers and sanctuary churches. Someone was carving freedom's capillaries beneath the cage. Refugees coded messages into embroidery, pastors hid GPS darts in communion wafers, and grandmothers sewed maps onto quilt squares. Hope that reckless contraband oozed through the cracks faster than concrete could seal them. Then came the accident. On a windless April midnight, Section Delta tunnel intersected an uncharted aquifer pocket left over from a Paleozoic sea. Water burst with the rage of a ruptured artery, 3,000 gallons in under a minute. Mateo and Lucia scrambled for the sump pumps while Omar triggered emergency bulkheads, but a young courier named Esteban was swept into darkness. They found his body at dawn, wedged between support ribs, eyes still wide with surprise. Aaliyah wept in a silence broken only by the distant grind of patrol bulldozers. They paused operations for 18 hours, longest halt since inception. Guilt weighed heavier than the shale overhead. Yet by sunset, Esteban's mother arrived at the safe house, cheeks dry, resolve unbroken. "Keep digging," she whispered. "He died moving forward." Grief forged steel. Jiawen upgraded the intrusion spoofing AI, teaching it to mimic the magnetic resonance of bedrock, a phantom cloak for their tunnels. Lucia recruited additional medics under the guise of trauma drills. Omar redesigned the arch geometry to withstand unexpected hydrostatic bursts. Project Horizon resumed, slower, surer, fueled by the memory of one lost runner. Up in Washington, President Trump brandished fresh intel before a televised cabinet meeting. Satellite anomalies, he declared, suggested subversive subterranean activity. He demanded a task force, Operation Deep Sentinel. Elon Musk, dialing in from a Tesla launch pad, offered prototype tunneling drones to accompany the hunt, twin siblings of the machines that once bored Hyperloop test tracks. The irony tasted like rust. In early May, Deep Sentinel agents arrived in El Paso wearing polished exoskeleton armor and smiles that never reached their eyes. They commissioned Caterpillar drill columns to punch verification shafts every quarter mile, a deadly lattice aimed to intersect any hidden conduits. The noose tightened invisibly, one steel tooth at a time. But horizons are contagious. Across universities and truck stops and shadow markets, allies surfaced. A disgruntled Tesla firmware engineer leaking drone schematics, a retired Caterpillar foreman falsifying maintenance orders, a Navajo coder feeding cryptic coordinates into weather reports. They stitched a quilt of resistance far broader than any wall. By late May, Project Horizon's main artery reached the outskirts of Las Cruces, breaching the safe house cellar beneath an abandoned diner once famous for its green chili milkshakes. The exit was disguised beneath a rusted walk-in freezer. For the first time, Aaliyah stood on the northern side without a checkpoint's gaze, tasting freedom that felt suspiciously like ordinary desert air. She radioed back a single word, Eclipse, the prearranged signal that the lifeline was open. 72 hours later, 58 souls, including toddlers clutching paper airplanes and elders gripping faded passports, crawled through the passage and emerged into starlight. Some kissed the sand, others just laughed until tears soaked their dust masks. Hope had graduated from rumor to artery, pumping courage through the nation's hidden veins. Triumph, however, flickers loud enough to be heard. Sentinel microphones installed near Sector 21 caught a burst of subterranean harmonics, cheers malfunctioning as seismic chatter. Algorithms flagged it anomalous, human analysts amplified. Major Reed pinned the coordinates, eyes narrowing. The hunt, once blind, found its scent. And in the tunnels, a faint vibration, like distant thunder, echoed toward Aaliyah's team. Metal teeth descending. Project Horizon had pierced the wall, but the wall was awakening. Mid-June bled into July, and in the furnace of the Chihuahuan Desert, the chase became a chess match buried 40 feet below ground. The first blow landed on a moonless night when Sentinel eyes flashed a priority alert, a sharp-edged cavity forming beneath mile marker 73. Deep Sentinel's Caterpillar tread rigs thundered in, drilling a verification shaft lit by halogen arcs the color of surgical steel. But Mateo's false void algorithm, coded to echo the density profile of fossilized seashell beds, projected a phantom cavity 8 meters west of the real tunnel. Homeland's boroscope found only dusty limestone and a desiccated beetle. The squad marked it false positive and drove on. Project Horizon exhaled as the drills receded like distant thunderheads. Yet survival bought them no rest. The network's traffic surged after Eclipse, families trapped in detention camps, amputees needing prosthetics, journalists smuggling video evidence of overcrowded cages. Every new load strained the tunnel's ribbed arches and the team's brittle nerves. Lucia rationed oxygen canisters with a gambler's dread. Omar reinforced fault lines with scavenged rebar lashed together by welding arcs that painted ghostly constellations across limestone walls. Above, President Trump toured Sector Command flanked by cameras and the new icon of his crackdown, a silver-skinned burrowing drone emblazoned with a red, white, and blue Tesla lightning bolt. The best tech, he boasted, resting a hand on the hull. Elon says this beauty can sniff a gopher at 50 feet. Musk broadcast on a giant monitor from Cape Canaveral, grinned and added, it bores 3 times faster than a human crew and streams full LiDAR telemetry to Starlink. We'll map every rat hole by Labor Day. The drones launched in pairs dubbed Hound and Hammer. They tore through gypsum like serrated angels, uncoiling fiber optic nerves behind them. Jiawen tapped into Starlink's downlink using a software backdoor left by a sympathetic SpaceX contractor, but each packet she intercepted ate bandwidth her spoofing scripts needed. She rewrote code in 20-minute sprints, fingers raw, eyes rimmed with sleepless crimson. On her laptop, a single line blinked, if they see us, we see them first. A week later, Hound diverged from its survey grid. Onboard heuristics flagged a thermal anomaly, the residual warmth of last night's welding torch. In the command trailer, Major Reed's pulse spiked. He overlaid seismic overlays atop drone telemetry. Lines converged on a square of desert scrub no larger than a tennis court. Reed ordered Hammer to flank and triangulate. Underground, Omar felt the bedrock quiver, an alien vibration, steady, mechanical, probing. Aaliyah pressed an ear to the chalky wall. The hum resonated like a dentist's drill magnified 1,000-fold. Incoming machine, she whispered. Not ours. They triggered Protocol Ember. Silence all power tools, drop ambient temperature to mask thermal bloom, reroute comms to low-band burst mode. Mateo killed every LED, tunnels plunged into pitch save for wrist-strapped radium dials. Silence thickened until even heartbeats felt treasonous. Hammer bored to a depth of 38 feet and halted. Its sonar sketched a hollow less than 6 meters ahead, yet the cavity mimicked the acoustic scatter of karst pockets common in old survey maps. Reed hesitated. One wrong puncture and a cave-in could swallow millions in hardware. He requested confirmation from Hound. Jiawen seized the delay. She slipped a malware shard, codenamed Doberman, into Hound's update channel. The code inverted LiDAR depth matrices, making solid rock appear void and void appear granite. Hound veered south, barking phantom alarms about a sprawling cavern. Reed cursed, redeployed, and lost 3 crucial hours while his drones chased echoes. In those 3 hours, Aaliyah's crew birthed a miracle. Lucia injected compressed nitrogen to freeze moisture in the surrounding limestone. Omar set low-yield thermite rings in a crescent pattern. And Mateo detonated them in precise intervals that collapsed a sacrificial cul-de-sac. Tons of rubble settled into a perfect decoy shaft, the world's most expensive pothole. When Hammer finally punched through, it speared a tomb of fractured stone. Reed's victory photo showed only pulverized dust. The escape bought Horizon momentum, but the cost was time. Repairs slowed throughput. Every schedule slipped. On Independence Day, while fireworks moaned above gated suburbs, Jiawen's data scraper caught an encrypted bulletin. Deep Sentinel to receive mobile rapid response battalion equipped with portable sonic resonators. Gear capable of scanning a quarter-mile radius in minutes. Once deployed, stealth would become arithmetic, and arithmetic favored the state. Aaliyah convened a council beneath the safehouse lantern freezer. Sweat beaded on pipe valves, sand gnats danced in flashlight halos. We can't outrun sonar, she said. We have to change the map. Mateo unfurled a fresh blueprint, an improvised fork. Instead of one artery north, they would carve 2 westward spurs toward the Rio Grande aqueducts, then surface through maintenance culverts inside the walls themselves. We break people out next, he said. Empty detention blocks, torch the data servers, leave nothing for them to cage. The proposal felt less like smuggling, more like open war. Eyes met in wavering lantern light, unspoken terror stiffened spines, but nobody said no. They called the gambit Phase Phoenix. Construction began at once, but fortune plays double-edged games. 2 nights in, while Mateo calibrated the angle of a pilot bore, vibrations rippled, a cadence of boots in the passage behind. Lucia spun, flashlight blazing. Silhouetted in dust stood a teenager clutching a sat phone and a breathing mask. He mouthed, "I'm sorry," then sprinted back towards Sector Delta. Seconds later, the tunnel behind him vomited white light, flash tubes thrown by rapid response troopers pouring through a just-breached bulkhead. Chaos detonated. Lucia dragged the kid to cover. Omar popped smoke grenades modified with copper shavings that glowed molten, scrambling thermal optics. but the breach cut off the main shaft from their only western exit. Automatic rifles barked, ricochets whined off steel ribs. Aaliyah felt a bullet tug fabric from her sleeve before burying in sand. Jiawen slapped a det cord strip onto the control panel of the industrial printer loaded with spare carbide bits and 300 pounds of powdered tungsten. "Back up data and run," she yelled. Mateo hesitated. The printer was their lifeline, but a second burst shredded its casing. He armed the charge. They sprinted. The explosion roared like a furnace giving birth. A shockwave tore through support pillars, collapsing 20 yards of tunnel and the soldiers inside. Dust billowed, choking light, dampening screams. Horizon escaped down a cramped ventilation conduit barely 3 feet tall, elbows and knees raw against jagged limestone. Behind them fire danced orange in the void. They emerged hours later into the hush of Safehouse Lantern. Exhaustion etched lines into Lucia's cheeks. Jiawen coughed blood-flecked dust. Mateo stared at blackened knuckles that wouldn't stop shaking. The teenager, Miguel, admitted through tears he'd been caught stealing canned beans. Officers offered freedom for a phone beacon. Betrayal weighed less than the fact he, too, was a kid lost in a cage of walls. Lucia patched his sprained ankle anyway. News of the skirmish hit state media at dawn. Terror tunnels neutralized. President Trump praises brave response. He pledged an extra $1 billion for tunnel hunter drones and hailed Elon Musk's machines as unstoppable American ingenuity. Stock for Caterpillar and Tesla spiked 6% before noon. Horizon's printer lay in molten ruin, and with it their mass production capacity. Aaliyah gathered the team beneath a roof of creaking 2x4s. "We've lost machines," she said, voice ragged. "What we haven't lost is map knowledge or the will to finish Phoenix." She opened a duffel of smuggled hard drives, detention center schematics, patrol rosters, resonance frequencies of the new sonic scanners. "We make the tunnels secondary. The real battle is information. We burn the cage with data." The plan mutated. Jiawen would hijack Starlink ground stations to dump classified detainee logs onto every public blockchain. Mateo and Omar would pivot from drilling to sabotage, install resonance dampers on deep sentinel scanners, feed them white noise echoes till sonar read like rainfall. Lucia rallied medics from Doctors Without Borders cells long since forced underground. Hope grew teeth. July's final week wheeled into a furnace gust. Hound and Hammer, both patched after the decoy fiasco, converged north of Las Cruces to validate a cluster of magnetic voids. Jiawen's echo machines made sure they saw exactly what she wanted, a perfect grid of suspicious hollows begging for excavation. Reed redeployed half his battalion, leaving the detention megacomplex at Socorro under minimal guard, precisely where Phase Phoenix would soar. The night before the strike, Aaliyah traced a fingertip across tunnel walls scarred by shrapnel and soot. She thought of Esteban, of Miguel's trembling apology, of her parents waking halfway across the world certain she was still a student, not an insurgent. She whispered a prayer in Arabic, half-forgotten verses about paths through seas and walls that fall to trumpets. Sunset painted the desert in molten copper. Teams checked harnesses, synced watches, loaded EMP grenades salvaged from strip mine detonators. Aaliyah clipped a battered monarch butterfly pin to her collar, a fragment of mural from her first day in America. She looked each comrade in the eye. "Tomorrow," she said, "the wall learns what wings feel like." They descended into silence lit only by glow sticks, vanishing like ghosts called home by thunder. Night slid into morning as though the desert itself were holding its breath. Somewhere high overhead, Starlink satellites ticked across black sky like silent seconds on a cosmic wristwatch, each one a mirror in Elon Musk's grand design. And tonight each would serve as a beacon against his newest machines. At 0400, Aaliyah's voice whispered through bone conduction mics. "Phoenix ignition." 3 words, soft as sand. But they rippled through a lattice of abandoned culverts, drainage pipes, and limestone bores that now formed a circulation system for rebellion. Jiawen lay belly down inside an unmarked fiber hub shack west of Socorro, laptop balanced on a coil of dusty cobble. Her malware suite masqueraded as a routine firmware patch for Starlink Ground Station K9, yet the code's true heartbeat was a detonator. Once activated, every detainee record, surveillance transcript, and internal memo tag top secret. Deep Sentinel would replicate to public blockchains before federal sysadmins could yank a single cord. A mile east, Omar and Mateo crawled beneath a tangle of water mains feeding the megacomplex. They slathered each pipe with a viscous paste of powdered iron and ferric chloride, a chemical chorus that would sing interference into the new sonic resonators. Above them, Caterpillar flatbeds rumbled, hauling crates stamped with DHS logos and Tesla lightning bolts. Matteo stroked a crate's underbelly with a magnet-lined gauntlet, rearranging the drone's compass calibration by a single cruel degree. The enemy would still hear echoes, just never where they actually were. Lucia guided a caravan of medics through a maintenance duct big enough for only a stooped shuffle. Holstered across her chest were 2 canisters of aerosolized EMP slurry. A single burst would short every RFID ankle shackle inside the detention barracks. Nestled in her pocket sat Miguel's bent ID tag, haircut rough from tunnel scissors. He now walked point, eyes no longer damp with guilt but sharpened into purpose. At 0500, Trump's Iron Curtain glowed pink under the first spill of dawn. The wall here towered 60 feet, armored with recycled Tesla Cybertruck panels, a joint venture that had doubled both companies' stock price the day Musk christened it Armor for America. Guard towers swung LiDAR beams like lighthouse searchlights across the sand. To the east, a mirrored segment caught sunrise and threw it back as a blinding blade, the perfect distraction. Aaliyah and a team of climbers emerged from a tunnel mouth less than 2 feet high, hidden beneath a tumble of railroad scrap. They wore ex-military exoskeleton braces scavenged at auction and rewired by college dropouts. With each silent leap, they scaled service ribs welded to the wall's interior. At the summit she saw, for the briefest heartbeat, the horizon beyond. A flat ochre plain, mottled with mesquite and the thin silver line of Interstate 25. Freedom looked so undramatic it could have been a postcard. She planted the first of 3 zipline anchors. Lucia, below, primed a coil of carbon fiber cable, strong enough to ferry 200 pounds at 50 miles per hour. Tonight, the refugees would not crawl, they would fly. The breach. Everything started with music, as revolutions sometimes do. Jiaowen's script triggered the detention PA system, hijacking an old separate audio wire forgotten by network engineers. Out of dusty ceiling speakers poured Sam Cooke. "A change is gonna come." Guards paused, confused. Some smirked at the anachronism, others just rolled eyes. It bought exactly 11 seconds. Time for Miguel to slide from a linen cart and lob an EMP grenade into the central control kiosk. Blue-white sparks crackled. Screens died. Automatic locks thunked open. Cell doors yawned like fists unclenching. Lucia's medics herded families into formation 200 strong. Ankle shackles inert, heartbeats racing ahead. On cue, floodlights died as Matteo's resonance dampers fed white noise into the main breaker sensors. In that instant, every tower's night mode cameras thought it was still dawn, and alarms slept. Aaliyah's zipline whined under first load. A grandmother clutching a worn Quran. A boy with Lego pieces sewn into his coat. They vanished down the slope toward the aqueduct outflow where Omar had reinforced tunnel mouth echo. Every 20 seconds, another figure glided across bleak air, silhouettes painted gold by rising sun. Major Silas Reed's command trailer blinked red at 0514. Primary feeds offline, biometric quant arrays zeroed, motion sensors fizzing static. He slapped an emergency switch, bringing Hound and Hammer to immediate ready. Burrowing drones revved turbines, nose cones glowing cerulean. Tesla autopilot clusters rerouted flight paths toward the wall's interior catwalk, where heat maps now bloomed like fireworks. But Jiawen owned those charts. Her Doberman shard inverted color gradients. Refugees appeared cool as desert shade. Guard patrols flared hot as magnesium fuses. Reed dispatched squads straight toward phantoms of themselves and then cursed the ghost code, ripping his sensors to shreds. He ordered drones to surface and strike manually. Hammer burst from subgrade first, geysering dust. Its plasma torch roared as it sheared through girder supports, only to tumble into an engineered sinkhole Matteo had salted with acid before dawn. Hound surfaced seconds later, but Omar's ferric paste scrambled its ground sonar. The machine spun, misregistering distance to wall studs, and crashed throat first into a steel I-beam. Sparks screamed. $2 million of Silicon Valley promise died gurgling in chlorine dust. Reed typed panic. High above him, stock tickers in New York reacted in real time. Tesla down 7 points, Caterpillar down 4. Analysts on breakfast shows would soon call it a double dip of tech optimism into insurgent quicksand. Down on the desert floor, the numbers translated to molten lithium and a coughing drone. The data flood. Blockchain transaction hashtag 978 229 044 propagated at 0520. Its payload, 21 gigabytes of detainee logs, medical neglect reports, unredacted facial recognitions, 2 signed memos ordering overstock transfer quotas from asylum facilities to newly privatized labor farms. In less than a minute, mirrors popped on every decentralized node. A mother in Michigan, doom scrolling before work, saw her nephew's intake photo trending under hashtag Iron Cage Files. By noon, high schoolers in Seoul would remix the documents into TikTok callouts. By dusk, European parliaments demanded sanctions. When Aaliyah's team finished Evac 93, Reed's second wave finally reached the inner yard. They met not chaos but deafening unity. Detainees massed shoulder to shoulder, chanting "Open the wall" in 7 languages. An officer raised a bullhorn, a plastic water bottle arced. Then someone, no one would agree who, fired a warning shot. Echoes folded into screams. Lucia's medics surged, forming barricades of gurneys and ballistic blankets. The wall became a canyon of sound. Sam Cooke still crooning from one half-dead speaker, rifles barking, children wailing, the wall's own steel resonating like a frozen gong. Over comms, Omar growled, "We're out of time." Aaliyah descended a final ladder, boots hitting dust beside Reyes, a former union welder who had rerouted his life to forge rebar spines in the tunnels. He pushed a sack into her hands. Plastic explosives molded around a caterpillar depth sensor yanked off a half-buried rig. "Blow the gate. They can't shoot us all if we scatter." In his eyes, she saw the brittle calculus of martyrdom. She forced the charge back. "We scatter. They hunt," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But if we broadcast, they can't hide." She pointed to the guard tower's microwave relay dish, a pregnant spider of bandwidth. "We turn their eyes inside out." Reyes nodded, lips thin. Together they and Mateo scaled the maintenance stairwell, round after narrow round, while slugs sparked off the cage mesh below. At the top, they ripped the dish's panel and spliced Jia Wen's drive directly into the beam. The tower's data artery vomited 1,500 live feeds. Tunnel maps, corruption reports, facial rec scans of agents off-duty harvesting private intel. Inside 30 seconds, hashtag wall leaks trended #1 worldwide. Screens in Times Square flickered. Commuters stared like dreamers waking inside someone else's nightmare. Rocket flare grenades arced overhead, troopers signaling air support. But in that same digital instant, the FAA grounded drones over 3 states, pending cybersecurity anomalies. Jia Wen, buried in her hub shack, smiled a wolfish grin and deleted her own footprints line by line. Dominoes. Fort Bliss Command received orders to redeploy riot armor columns south on Interstate 10. 60 miles from El Paso, they hit rolling roadblocks. Truckers parked 18-wheelers bumper to bumper, citing engine trouble. Their dashcams live-streamed in split screen with the tunnel's exodus, a digital freeway of solidarity. At a rail hub in Tucson, operators diverted freight cars into an impromptu barricade. Someone posted a meme of caterpillar dozers forming a smiley face with the caption, "Your walls are cute." Wall Street bled capital. Telecom boards postponed quarterly calls. A Tesla shareholder lawsuit drafted itself in 1,000 Discord channels. Elon Musk tweeted a single word, "investigating," then fell uncharacteristically silent as engineers texted him photos of charred drone carcasses. Trump took the lectern at 9 a.m. Eastern, orange lights painting deeper shadows beneath his eyes. He declared the tunnelers terrorists, labeled the leaks foreign psyop, vowed to flay the tech traders. Reuters photos captured him gripping the podium so tight his knuckles looked carved from chalk. But markets red sweat like meteors red gravity. Inside Safehouse Lantern, exhausted refugees slumped against walls whose dust still vibrated from distant shellfire. Lucia stitched a girl's cheek where flying concrete left a crescent. Miguel handed out ration bars stamped humanitarian aid, Canada, smuggled south through networks that now had names. Aurora Line in Arizona, Coyote Cable in New Mexico, Horizon Phase North in Colorado. Aaliyah collapsed against a water barrel. Her monarch pin was singed, one wing blackened. Yet in that soot she felt something wild and winged still beating. "Phoenix isn't just us anymore," Mateo said, voice breaking. "It's everyone who forwarded a document, blocked a road, rebooted a drone into a ditch." She allowed herself a cracked smile. "Good, because the wall still stands, and we're going to need an army to knock the rest of it down." Jiawen broke in over comms, static fizzing with adrenaline. "Heads up, DHS spinning up satellite thermal sweeps over half the state. We've got maybe 12 hours before they pinpoint every tunnel entrance." Omar unfurled a topographical overlay smeared with dust. "Then we don't wait to be found. We detonate the cage from the inside. Take down 3 key support pylons near the Colorado River Dam bypass." Entire western segment folds like a cheap camping chair. Lucia stared, equal parts fear and resolve. "You're talking about a breach big enough to walk an army through, or march one out," Omar said. Aaliyah looked at the map, saw fault lines like fractures in an old bone. She thought of Aleppo's broken skyline, of Esteban's body wedged between tunnel ribs, of families standing tonight on bare concrete tasting the first sip of sky. Every wall, she realized, was only temporary scaffolding around fear, until someone kicked hard enough. "So we kick," she whispered. For the first time in months, silence followed. Not the hush of terror, but the pregnant quiet before a storm acknowledges its own thunder. She straightened, dusted limestone from her palms. "We split. Jiawen, black out their thermal nets. Lucia, stage evac corridors through Sector Bravo. Omar, prep charges. Mateo, plant decoys everywhere else so they can't tell which way is up. We bring the wall down at dawn." Miguel limped forward, face still peppered with grit. "And when the dust clears?" Aaliyah met his gaze. "Then we keep moving, until there's no wall left to hide behind." Beyond the tunnel mouth, the desert wind had changed. It carried distant horns, rubber on asphalt, the low roar of thousands moving against something massive. A sound not unlike ocean surf against a dam made of mirrors. Phase Phoenix now had a second life. Phase Thunder. The desert night inhaled the heat of yesterday and exhaled a chill that bit like prophecy. In safehouse lantern power, cables hummed faintly. The only illumination, the amber glow of battery lanterns that painted every face with the same taut resolve. They had less than 8 hours to fold an empire around its own spine, and every second ticked like a caterpillar hydraulic piston primed to shear. Aaliyah's plan unfurled across a plywood table littered with sweating water jugs. 3 primary support pylons anchored the western segment of Trump's Iron Curtain, where it paralleled the Colorado River Dam bypass. Those pylons, P7, P8, and P9, were hollow steel columns 60 feet in diameter, filled with rebar cages and high-density concrete. During construction, the contractors had cut costs by lining each with recycled Tesla battery casings touted as eco-reinforcement. Tonight, that marketing gimmick would become their Achilles heel. Lithium cells under extreme heat behaved less like support and more like subterranean firecrackers. Omar's charges would trigger a runaway thermal cascade. The wall would fracture along pre-scored cutouts added when the battery casings were welded. The breach would be less an explosion and more a controlled implosion, folding inward so debris fell toward the American side. Symbolic, catastrophic, televised from every angle. Mateo and Reyes gathered the shaped charges. Thermite modules nested around gel-packed C6 detonators and wrapped in foil scavenged from Tesla drone fuselages. Each weighed as much as a 5th grader and could vaporize steel thicker than a bank vault door. Lucia distributed breather masks, epinephrine injectors, and 10-minute burn dressings. Jiawen, hunched over 3 laptops, drilled her team of ghost coders via encrypted radio on blackout protocols. They would hijack Starlink ground stations Theta, Lambda, and Sigma, then flood airborne thermal nets with an infrared whiteout that made the entire Colorado River corridor glow like a single blank bonfire. No eye in the sky would see which pixel masked the real inferno until it was too late. Outside, the desert rumbled with the restless choreography of allies. Flatbeds flashed headlights in Morse, mapping temporary safe lanes for evac convoys. A string of 18 ersatz ambulances idled 30 miles back. Sirens yanked and interiors gutted to haul more bodies if the breach spiraled into civilian stampede. On the Mexican side, Communities lit bonfires along the ridgeline. An ancient beacon chain resurrected, telling watchers on both sides of the wall that something irreversible loomed. Aaliyah, Omar, Mateo, and Reyes descended Echo Tunnel, gear clanging softly in worn duffels. Miguel insisted on point despite his limp. His reflection flitted over sweat-black rock, a silhouette carrying both guilt and its redemption. 2 miles in, the tunnel forked. Left branch sloped toward the riverbed, right toward P7's foundation. They split by whispered counts of 3, comms clamped to chest plates to shorten wires that might snag. Every breath steamed in the chill. Above them, Deep Sentinel Command roiled. Major Silas Reed, eyes gritty from sleeplessness and headlines screaming #WallLeaks, paced beneath fluorescence that flickered like faulty convictions. Elon Musk had just finished a terse video conference, voice tin-sharp with fury that 2 prototype drones now lay gutted in dust. He promised a fresh gift, an experimental GeoNose, a Tesla-built AI radar that sniffed discrepancies in magnetic resonance like sharks sniffed blood. Reed watched the device offload from a Chinook, all chrome fins and antennae. He prayed it would earn him a victory before Washington's patience evaporated. On cable news, pundits repeated a White House leak. Trump contemplated invoking emergency clauses to nationalize foreign-owned social platforms broadcasting the leaks. Markets spasmed. Tesla dipped another 4 points. Caterpillar clawed upward on defense contract speculation, while generals forecasted Ja when Cyberteeth sank into Starlink. Her code, callsign Black Orchid, rode legitimate maintenance packets, locked onto the firmware's tiny universal decrypt routine, and unfolded like a blossom under ultraviolet. 3 ground stations rebooted gracefully right as the orbital constellation passed overhead. Their sensor arrays winked and returned junk, a homogeneous ocean of white heat covering half the state. Reed's operators blinked at thermographs that looked like blank cassette tapes and cursed. At ground level, P7's service hatch loomed, half buried behind a decorative berm of crushed red granite. Omar kneeled, fingers tracing weld seams in the hatch, then slid a plasma nib from his belt. Hiss of argon, flare of blue, sparks drifting like static snow. 5 minutes later, the panel gaped. Within, the pylon's hollow stomach extended downward into darkness studded with lithium brick grids. Reyes passed charges. Miguel shuttled them to Omar, who clamped magnetic anchors on every 5th brick ring. Mateo wired the last in series, nodding at the timer. 35 minutes. Enough. 2 ridges east. Aaliyah and a second crew scrambled under the monolithic underbelly of P9 where the battery lining was thinnest. She planted 3 thermite sausages, slapped epoxy initiators, and said aloud what Esteban once whispered. Moving forward, the phrase felt like a fingerprint burned into every decision since. Lucia, manning a field monitor from a culvert outflow, felt the hair rise on her arms at precisely 0359 when her scanner registered new frequencies. Heads up, she hissed. GeoNose just pinged, vectoring east to west. Jawen snarled soft Russian curses. She rerouted whiteout arrays, forming strobing speckles across the heat map to fake motion. For 7 minutes, the drone sniffed illusions. Its algorithm hung between contradictory solutions like a compass at magnetic north. Reed, tracking from his trailer, pounded the console. Somewhere a tech whispered system recursion overflow, which in plain English meant the smartest machine in the desert had just talked itself into a corner. Timers blinked amber at T-60. Omar extracted a battered walkie once owned by an ICE guard turned sympathizer. All tiles set, he whispered. Phoenix stands. The line crackled. Above them, fireworks began as pistol flares streaked across towers. Guards on alert after spotting a convoy of headlights deliberately aimed like a shining bullseye toward P8. But the convoy was a decoy, a phalanx of autonomous mining trucks Mateo's orchard harvester software had repurposed. Their diesel roars baited every camera, every tower searchlight, every shred of attention. Reed ordered live fire. Guard Captain Young hesitated. Rules of engagement barred shooting at vehicles that displayed a white flag. Reed shouted and cut the feed. Young enlisted men stared at monitors where trucks kept advancing, huge caterpillar silhouettes cresting dunes like steel whales. Aaliyah breathed dust-musk air and watched countdown slip below 30 seconds. Behind her, the river whispered, indifferent to walls. Miguel stood beside her, hands shaking not from fear but from electric adrenaline. 20 seconds. Trump's Twitter feed erupted with all-caps demands for total border dominance. He typed from the Situation Room while aides tried to explain their monitors were blind. Satellites all returned snow. Elon Musk sent a final encrypted text to Reed. Reboot drone. Hard reset. Reed did. The Geonosis spun down, then up, and in that millisecond its cache purged. Screen briefly cleared, revealing hot blips exactly where Mateo's team knelt with timers blinking red. Reed's shout was half-formed when 0. Light burst without sound. Thermite lances scythed through lithium grids. Runaway heat chains ignited cells in violent exothermic blossom. P7's ribcage deformed first, blooming outward then folding like petals in a time-lapse. 200 yards away, P8 followed. Joints groaning before concertina collapse slammed steel into sand. P9, seated deeper by Aaliyah herself, suffered a subsurface detonation. The ground heaved, and the pylon sank into its own footprint like a bishop swallowed by the chessboard. A heartbeat later, the western iron curtain bowed. Seams screeched. Cybertruck panels popped rivets like bullet hail. The wall, 60 feet of rhetoric, tariffs, Caterpillar bids, and Tesla alloys, shuddered, bent, and broke. An avalanche of mirrored metal cascaded westward, dust geysering as if the planet exhaled. Shockwaves rippled down the valley. Radar domes toppled. Drones tumbled from sky like scattered insects. A roar rolled across the river, bounced off canyon cliffs, and kept rolling. A locomotive thunder announcing the end of a chapter. Lucia cued evac corridors. Families sprinted through the gap, shadows threading between steam plumes and collapsing struts. Doctors guided wheelchairs over fractured asphalt. Children screamed delighted, terrified. An old mariachi trumpeter lifted a battered horn and blew 3 ragged notes that rode the chaos like a dare to history. Media helicopters banked, cameras drinking daylight. The breach streamed live within minutes. #WallFall. #Phoenix Thunder dominating every screen not already plastered with tumbling steel. Wall Street halted trading twice in a single hour. Tesla free fell, Caterpillar yo-yoed, immigration law firms crashed websites under traffic floods. In Washington, the Oval Office door stood ajar. Trump stared at feeds that showed his signature wall hemorrhaging refugees and hometown citizens alike. He blamed Musk, DHS, Trader Tech, Democrats, hurricanes, and a Vatican plot in one 10-minute tirade caught by a hot mic. Congressional leaders began closed-door caucuses on emergency competency provisions. Reporters outside heard the word resignation, whispered with disbelief usually reserved for solar eclipses. Deep in the desert, Omar scrambled over smoking debris to free a soldier pinned beneath twisted rebar. The man's visor shattered, eyes wide not in hate but stunned confusion. Omar gritted teeth and levered metal off his leg. The soldier croaked, "Why?" Omar answered, "Because walls make neighbors into ghosts." He left a tourniquet, pressed the man's radio into his hand, and ran. Red dust swirled. Aaliyah stood atop a slab that used to be P9, monarch pin gleaming charcoal. Beside her, Miguel stared at the gap, tears cutting paths through soot. She thought of Aleppo's bombed arches, of tunnels where love learned to whisper. Now here stood their opposite, a sky too wide for cages. Comm units blurred with chatter. Trucker convoys already ferrying families north. University dorms opening rooms, churches flinging doors wide. Jiawen hijacked a Times Square billboard and streamed a live counter of evacuees. Numbers climbing like a stock ticker of hope. Hacktivists overlaid a quote from Cook. "It's been a long time coming, but a change is gonna come." And yet, sirens rose distant. National Guard armor brigades rolled from Fort Bliss under presidential orders for full containment. Elon Musk, freshly subpoenaed, tweeted cryptically about civil infrastructure neutrality as Tesla engineers locked access to autopilot servers, refusing to let Humvees piggyback on their networks. Tech titans fractured into factions overnight, some pledging open platforms, others fortifying behind NDAs. Aaliyah called an emergency huddle among the rubble. Omar, Lucia, Mateo, Jiawen patching in, Reyes mending a busted knuckle, dozens more ringed by spontaneous volunteers. "We ruptured the cage," she said, voice rough. "But freedom through a hole is still a funnel. We need corridors, shelters, supply chains, legal shields. We need to build something, not just break." Mateo raised a hand streaked with soot. "We design modular shelters from wall scrap, panels already ballistic rated, solar coated. Reuse their armor for our homes." Lucia nodded fiercely. "Clinics come first. Trauma, heatstroke, dehydration. Refugees 12 deep along this valley by nightfall." Jiawen piped through comms. "Media wants spokespeople. Governments want scapegoats. Control the story or they'll write it for us." Omar elbowed a twisted beam, sparks popping. "Let them chase blame. We chase bridges." Literally. That railway spur at San Simon. Stripped rails can span arroyos and keep supply trucks rolling. Aaliyah listened, chest tight with exhaustion and awe. Around her she saw no central command, no hierarchy. Only ideas lighting in eyes faster than stars after sundown. A network born in tunnels now strode under open sky. Every stride another nail in the coffin of walls. She grabbed a shard of mirrored panel, scratched the first rough sketches of a mobile supply depot. "We used to call ourselves Horizon," she said, voice firm as steel cooling. "Then Phoenix. Now, we're Dawn. Because Dawn keeps moving forward, one time zone at a time, and it never asks permission." On cliff tops bonfires answered, whole ridgelines winking gold in the newborn breeze. Trucks growled, med-drones lifted, floodlights streamed across shattered steel, and from one collapsed pylon a vine of desert trumpet flower already reached for sun. Nature's editorial on permanence. Somewhere a camera panned over the gap and caught Aaliyah's silhouette against the widening day. Commentators would later freeze that frame and call it emblematic. The moment a wall became a bridge, the second a refugee engineer rewrote a country's blueprint. Stock charts could tumble and rise again. Presidencies could roar and blame, but the sound that mattered was the clatter of steel panels repurposed into shelter frames, the murmur of languages threaded by common relief, the impossible hush when fear sloughed off like snakeskin. Far above, satellites still ticked across the sky, their encrypted memories now seeded with black orchid code that refused to forget. History, rewritten in immutable blocks, stood immune to erasure. And on the desert floor Aaliyah lifted her monarch pin, wing-charred yet unbroken, toward the gap where sun spilled. She whispered a final word, equal parts prayer and instruction to whoever might follow: "Fly."